Hi, my name is John Petty, and I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Growing Up in Flip Flops. When I was young, my mom, I think probably because my father had passed away when I was young, enrolled me in Cub Scouts so I would have, some sort of male role models around me. And after I was in Cub Scouts, I went on to be in local Boy Scout troop. My time in Boy Scouts was both positive and negative. There were a lot of good things about Boy Scouts. I had the opportunity to attend the National Jamboree in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho in 1969. In attending that, I had the opportunity to fly on an airplane for the first time, and that airplane flight was all the way from Tampa to Spokane, Washington, nonstop. It was pretty amazing. I've experienced cold temperatures even in July in northern Idaho that I did not experience in South Florida. It was a generally positive time for me. There were good things that I would say about my time with the Boy Scouts. I got halfway through the final badge or level before you attempted Eagle Scout. And Eagle Scout is something that I believe to this day is one of the few things that you can say that you did as a child that still carries import as an adult. I think the saying goes, once an Eagle Scout, always an Eagle Scout. That's one of my regrets in life, is that I did not follow through complete Eagle Scout. I was even to the point of figure out what my project as an Eagle Scout was going to be before I dropped out. I learned a heck of a lot in Boy Scouts, out camping that I would not have ever had an opportunity to do without a father. I learned knots that I was able to use in sailing later. In earning my merit badges, I explored new and different things and learned about it. Heck of a lot of good stuff that came out of it. So, why didn't I complete my path as a Boy Scout onto Eagle? I got bored. Unfortunately, the troop leaders, when we would have our meetings, we would have the usual stuff, Pledge of Allegiance and reciting of the Boy Scout oath and all that sort of stuff. Then they'd take us out and we did military style drills. I'm talking left face, right face, about face, how to do this. The whole kit and caboodle. It bored me immensely. I didn't see what was coming out of it. And we did that week after week after week. It got so incredibly boring that, my mother would drive me down to the meeting. The meeting was held at our church, in an outbuilding at our church, and she would drop me off. And as soon as she drove away and turned the corner, I would scoot over, and in the youth building, they had a pool table, youth to play, as recreation. And I would go over and jimmy the lock and go in, and while the troop was meeting, I was inside practicing shooting pool. Not something I'm incredibly proud of, and my absences were noted, and after a while the scoutmaster came and said, if you don't start attending regularly, we're going to dismiss you from the troop. Certainly no skin off my nose, so I said okay, and talked to my mom about it and told her I was completely bored with it. She said, well, if that's what you want to do. It is a regret that I didn't stick through. I will mention one other thing that probably, I think, fed into my dissatisfaction. One evening, they were going to have a father son dinner. Obviously, I did not, my birth father had passed away. My mother had remarried, and my stepfather wanted absolutely nothing to do with anything that I was involved in. He completely, God knows why he was willing to enter into this relationship with my mother. But anyway, it was set up, and it was in a hollow square, the boys with their father, and the scoutmaster stood up and would introduce going around the table, and I was probably at about the 9 o'clock position seated, and was going around, and here's Jimmy Jones and his father Bob. Here's Sammy Smith and his father, John, and would stand up in order. And I saw this was going, and I knew I didn't have a father there. And I was trepidation as this announcement was going around the table. And it finally came to me, and the scoutmaster said, John Petty, and I stood up what seemed to be an eternity. That and hung in the air for me. Thankfully, a friend of mine that was in the troop, his father was probably a couple seats away, jumped up in spite of what seemed to be that eternity following that and for me, stood up and came over and put his arm beside me. The scoutmaster said, and Roland Palmer. That was my friend's dad's name. I was grateful for that, and then the scoutmaster continued on around. But that really left a bitter taste in my mouth of I was always going to be, it felt like I was going to be on the outside looking in. Remembering that I saw other kids who had gotten Eagle level, and it was this big family affair and everything like that coming up. I knew the only person that would be there for me was going to be my mom. It was just something that hung on me. But I have a lot of good memories about Boy Scouts. I have regrets that I didn't stick with it. I know I could have made Eagle. There were other awards that I had gotten that nobody else in the troop had achieved. I think at the time they were doing an awful lot of good, but it comes down to, it's the same thing I say about if you want to go to work for a company, I don't care what they're making, I don't care what they're doing. Look to the management. And do you trust the management? Well, in my case, I didn't trust the troop leaders to really be doing the right thing, in that they were focused on doing drills outside, could not have anticipated at that father and son meal that have something to handle for me. Don't cry for me. It's all past. I have great memories. My grandson's now in Cub Scouts, and I really encourage him in doing that. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode.